This is the labor leisure choice consumption model. What is the maximum amount of leisure which you can have? 24 hours. What is the maximum amount of consumption you can have? 24 W, in case if wage rate is W per hour. The slope of the budget line is, say, initially W1. Fine. And this is the initial indifference curve, and this is point A. Clear? Now what happens is that wage rate increases from W0 or W1 to W2. This is the new wage rate. Wage rate has increased from W1 to W2. It has increased. This was initially point A. Now the new point is, say, point B here. Now the point is that this was, say, how much you will say it is N1 and this is N2. Okay. Now what happens is, in case if your preferences are shown to be like this, okay, this is, say, C0 and this is C1. This is the first indifference curve, this is the second indifference curve. Initially your consumption, your choice lies at point A, where you are having a leisure of something like 24 minus N1. So N is the amount of labor. N is the amount of labor which you have. Clear? And 24 minus N1 is the amount of leisure which you have. This is AL1. And what happens is that when your wage rate has increased, as you could see, the amount of labor has increased and the amount of leisure has decreased. Okay, as we have told in the earlier recording, that that leisure is increasing in this direction while labor is increasing in this direction. So as you could see, when wage rates have increased, you started working harder. Clear? Now in this diagram, what you see is that initially you were sitting at point A, okay, and this we have labeled earlier as point N1, and then wage rises and this gray budget line becomes a new budget constraint, and your choice have shifted to point B, where you are consuming, say, N2. Okay. Now, in order to decompose this entire effect into substitution effect and income effect, what you have to do is that you have to create the new fictitious budget line. You have to create the new fictitious budget line, which is parallel to the new budget line. Okay, but it is tangential to the old indifference curve in order to keep the original utility constant. Say these are the two indifference curve which you have. The original indifference curve is C0, okay, and the new indifference curve is, say, C1. Now, this green budget line, as you could see, it is parallel to the new budget line. Okay, what does this signify? It signifies that the slope of the two budget lines is same, and the slope is the wage rate per hour. The new slope is W1. So even the slope of this new budget line, that is of this new fictitious budget line, which is this green budget line, is W1. Now, and this is tangential to the original indifference curve, keeping the original utility constant. So you move to point C. Okay, and let's say this point is, say, N3 here. Now the movement from point N1 to point N3, this entire movement is the substitution effect. Okay, while the movement from N3 to N2, fine, that is from point C to point B, is the income effect. So income effect in this case, it offsets this substitution effect. Okay, so what you have seen here is that when wages have increased, the person has started working more. Okay, now substitution effect is substitution effect in this case is the movement from N1 to N3, and substitution effect in this case, it dominates the income effect. Okay, so the result is, in this case, in this particular case which we have seen, is that the person is going to work more, okay, when wages are going to increase. But in the other case, okay, in the other case, and we'll see in this case, when you will derive in the next video the labor supply curve, it'll be an upward sloping curve. A supply curve has to be upward sloping. In case if your wages are increasing, you should be working more. But in labor economics, what you see is that you might have a tendency for supply less labor when wages have increased, and that give birth to the backward bending labor supply curve. Okay, and that is the case which we're going to discuss it now here. Okay, everything is same. So what you have is, initially you're sitting at, say, point A. Okay, and at this point W1 is the amount of the wages which you have per hour, and this is the amount of the leisure, the labor which you have, N1. Okay, now wages have increased, so you move to point B here, and what has happened here is that you have started working less. This is N1 to N2. Clear? Now, in order to decompose this effect into substitution effect and income effect, you'll draw this fictitious budget line, which will be parallel to the new budget line, but it is tangential to the original indifference curves. These indifference curves are, say, C0, C1. So you draw a budget line which is parallel to the new budget line and tangential here. Say it is at this point. Clear? And this is like this here. So this is, say, point N3. Clear? So this movement from point A to point C, this is the substitution effect here. Okay, and the movement from point N3 to N2, this is the income effect. As you could see here, income effect, it dominates substitution effect. Okay, in this case what you will see is that the person is having more of leisure. When wages have increased, instead of increasing amount of, instead of supplying increasing amount of labor, he is having more fun. Okay, and this gives rise to the downward sloping supply curve of labor. Okay, and when you draw the curve, it will be something like a backward bending supply curve of labor. We'll be deriving the labor supply curve and the demand curve for leisure from these two diagrams in the next recording.